This happened quite a few years ago, but it's stuck with me ever since. I'm 23 now. Back then, I was a full-fledged scout, started out in Cub Scouts, eventually moved up to the Boy Scouts, and in time earned the rank of Eagle Scout. Over the years, I went on more campouts than I could ever count. So many kids came and went, some dropped out early, some just didn't stick with it. But one person who stayed through it all, every meeting, every campfire, every muddy hike, was Justin. He and I were in the same grade, and by the time this story took place, we were pretty tight. We were both 15 years old, about to head into 10th grade. It's strange, but even now, I can't for the life of me remember exactly what park we were camping in. It's like that whole place was swallowed by time, just too long ago, and maybe that's for the best. The memory really begins once everyone had arrived at the campsite. Scoutmaster Davis, our troop leader, gathered us up and led the group on a hike through the woods to get to our spot. The sun was still up then, golden and warm, casting long shadows across the trail. Once we got there, we pitched our tents and had a quick snack. It was all pretty routine, laughing, tossing granola wrappers, hammering down steaks. But before we could settle in, Mr. Davis rounded us up again. He was big on hiking, especially hiking at night. Said it sharpened your sense of direction, forced you to rely on memory and instinct. So, just as the sun began to dip below the treetops, he took us on another hike, this time deeper into the woods. By the time we started heading back, darkness had crept in like a fog. We all had our flashlights out, beams cutting through the trees, the glow of the group flickering like fireflies in the gloom. That's when Mr. Davis decided to mess with the younger scouts. He had this little game he liked to play. He'd act like we were lost and then let one of the kids lead the way back, like a test of survival or something. He picked one of the smaller guys, probably no older than 11 or 12, and told him to guide us back to camp. The kid stepped forward, holding his flashlight like it was a sword, determined at first, until he suddenly froze. His body stiffened and his eyes locked on something in the dark ahead. Slowly, he turned to Mr. Davis and said, I heard something. Mr. Davis, ever the dramatic outdoorsman, raised a finger and stepped forward like he was in some kind of survival documentary. He brought one hand to his ear and made a gesture for silence, pretending to listen intently to the woods. Me and Justin couldn't help ourselves. We let out a short laugh at how serious he was acting. But Mr. Davis immediately turned and shushed us sharply, his expression more stern than playful. And then we heard it. A distinct crunch, a step, but not from any of us. It came from deeper in the woods, far enough to be hidden, but close enough to hear. It wasn't just a twig snapping. This was heavy, purposeful, like something big pressing down into the underbrush. Flashlights flickered in all directions now, darting through the trees, scattering shadows. Some kids were whispering nervously, others just froze, waiting for Mr. Davis to say something. He finally broke the silence. "It's okay," he said, his voice calm but firmer now. "As long as we make enough noise, we'll keep any predators away." The word predators hung in the air like smoke. I could feel a small knot twist in my stomach. Hearing that from an adult, especially one like him, made it real. It wasn't a joke anymore. From that point on, Mr. Davis took the lead, flashlight aimed ahead, pace just a bit quicker than before. But even as we moved, the unease didn't fade. Several times, too many times. Either me, Justin, or one of the other scouts would suddenly stop and whip around, swearing we'd just heard more footsteps behind us. Crunching leaves, shifting branches. Something, or someone, was following. Each time, Mr. Davis would say the same thing. Stay close, keep moving, don't get quiet. By the time we finally reached the campsite again, I felt exhausted, but alert, like my body had tensed up and refused to relax. We got right to work making dinner. We roasted a couple of turkeys over the fire, popped open a few cans of corn, and tried to fall into the rhythm of camping life again. The warmth of the flames helped. The smell of the food, the chatter, the flicker of the firelight, it all started to bring us back to normal. Once everyone had eaten, we settled around the campfire, stomachs full, legs stretched out in the dirt. That's when Mr. Davis started up one of his famous campfire stories. He was good at those. He knew how to hold a crowd. But he didn't get far. The sound came again. This time, it wasn't just one or two of us hearing it. It was everyone. Footsteps, circling the campsite. Slow, methodical, just beyond the ring of light cast by the fire. Kids twisted around in their seats, flashlights trembling in their hands, trying to catch a glimpse through the trees. Even the scoutmasters exchanged looks, quiet, serious ones. Then Assistant Scoutmaster Roberts suddenly stood up. "All right," he muttered, "this will scare it off." He walked briskly to his tent, unzipped it with practiced urgency, and pulled out a rifle. In one swift, practiced motion, he raised it and fired a single shot straight into the air. The blast echoed across the trees, startling birds into flight somewhere far off. Then, silence. We didn't hear another footstep after that. Not one. After about an hour of listening to Mr. Davis's stories, tales that, under different circumstances, might have felt thrilling instead of unnerving, the group started to wind down. One by one, scouts began heading off to their tents, tired from the long day of hiking, cooking, and tension. Justin and I shared a tent, and once we climbed inside and zipped it shut, we didn't really spend much time joking around like we usually did. The scoutmasters always woke us up ridiculously early, and the day had drained us both. Outside, the only sounds were the quiet hum of crickets and the soft, irregular pop and crack of the dying fire. The night had taken over completely now, wrapping around the campsite like a damp, heavy blanket. I drifted off fast. My legs were sore, and the hike had worn me out more than I realized. But at some point, how long after I couldn't say, I felt Justin nudge me. Groggy, I blinked through the darkness, my breath catching as I listened. Footsteps. Soft, deliberate steps on dry earth, right outside our tent. The fire outside hadn't gone out completely. It still glowed faintly, just enough to cast flickering orange light against the fabric of our tent walls. And in that light, we could see the shadow. A person, tall, broad-shouldered, standing just a few feet from us. I whispered, barely above a breath. "So what? It's probably someone just going to take a piss." But Justin didn't say anything this time. He just looked at me, tense, unmoving, eyes wide. Then he motioned toward the zipper, told me to peek outside. My stomach dropped, but I did what he said. I reached for the zipper as quietly as I could, each inch of movement sounding impossibly loud in the silence. I peeled back the flap just enough to peer through the narrow opening, and I froze. A man, if you could even call him that, was moving through the campsite. He was massive, heavily built, his shoulders stretching the seams of a torn work shirt stained with something dark. Over his head was a crude, dirty sack with 2 holes cut for eyes. In one hand, clutched tightly like it belonged there, was a long, gleaming knife. He was walking slowly between the tents, not stumbling, not confused, like he knew exactly where he was, like he was looking for something, or someone. I yanked the zipper shut as silently as I could and turned to Justin, whispering, "Be quiet, don't say a word." We had no phones. None of us were allowed to bring them on these trips. No flashlight, no way to signal the scoutmasters without leaving the tent, and we sure as hell weren't going to do that. So we waited. Eyes wide, barely breathing, we sat there in the dark, backs against the nylon wall, listening for every footstep, every rustle. But we couldn't tell if the man was still out there, couldn't even be sure when or if he'd left. Minutes dragged by like hours. Time didn't move the same way anymore. It bent and stretched with every sound from the woods. Eventually, though I don't remember how, it all faded. The fear didn't go away, but exhaustion finally won, and somehow we fell asleep. We were jolted awake by the sharp, blaring sound of that stupid wake-up horn, one of the Scoutmaster's favorite ways to signal the start of a new day. Justin and I sat up, both of us blinking in the light, disoriented. It almost felt surreal that we'd actually managed to fall asleep after everything that had happened the night before. But here we were, alive, unharmed, and still trying to make sense of it all. We didn't waste a second. As soon as we pulled ourselves together, we went straight to the Scoutmasters to tell them what we'd seen. All 3 of them, Mr. Davis, Mr. Roberts, and the 3rd leader, Mr. Keener, immediately gave us their full attention. They didn't laugh. They didn't brush us off. They asked us again and again if we were absolutely serious, if we were sure about what we saw. We were, and they knew we weren't joking. Without wasting any time, they made a decision. Everyone needed to pack up, now. Calls were made to parents, and within 3 hours, kids were being picked up, one by one. The campsite that had been full of life and energy the night before was suddenly quiet, anxious, and tense, like we were all standing in the middle of something that had already gone too far. But then came the part that really unsettled everyone. 2 of the younger kids, both around 11 or 12, told the Scoutmasters that their entire duffel bags had gone missing overnight. Everything, clothes, socks, even their extra shoes, gone. At first, we thought maybe an animal dragged the bags off, or maybe someone had just misplaced them. But the Scoutmasters went to investigate around their tents. What they found chilled all of us. Each of those tents had tiny, deliberate holes cut into the fabric, small slits just large enough for an eye to peer through. They weren't rips, they weren't accidents, they were carved with precision. Someone had watched them, watched while they slept. We all stood there, silent, staring at those holes, at the evidence that someone had crept into the campsite in the middle of the night and gotten close, closer than we ever realized. The Scoutmasters reported everything to the town authorities, the same town that managed the park. But honestly, that never really brought me any peace. To this day, what still haunts me is how real it was. That some stranger, a grown man, followed us deep into the woods, moved among our tents, spied on kids while they were sleeping, stole their clothes, and who knows what else. We were lucky, no one got hurt, but the damage was done. The incident shattered the group in a quiet, invisible way. Some parents, understandably, said their kids would never go on another campout again, and they didn't. And that's the part that hits the hardest. One sick person, just one, can take something pure, something exciting and good, and ruin it for everyone. And that's exactly what happened. I'm a 15-year-old Boy Scout from Houston, Texas. A few summers ago, our troop flew out to Denver, Colorado for a week-long trip, and from there, we drove about 45 minutes south to a place called Camp Alexander, nestled in the woods not too far from Colorado Springs. Me and 4 others from our troop were enrolled in the camp's High Adventure program. It's basically a series of intense outdoor activities, climbing rugged mountain trails, whitewater rafting, the works. It was meant to push us, test our limits, and give us something to remember. 4 days in, everything had been going great. No injuries, no major problems, just pure, exhausting fun. That day, we had pitched our tents right along the banks of the Arkansas River, since we were scheduled to raft it the following morning. The spot was beautiful, serene, tucked away in a pocket of trees, the sound of the water rushing nearby, making it feel like we were miles away from the rest of the world. But as peaceful as it was, I'd been having trouble sleeping ever since we arrived. Something about the sleeping bags, maybe the altitude or the cold night air. Whatever it was, every night I'd wake up drenched in sweat, uncomfortable and restless. That night was no different. I jolted awake, face buried in a small puddle of drool on my pillow, my entire body slick with sweat. My skin clung to the inside of the sleeping bag like plastic wrap. Disoriented, I reached around in the dark until I found my watch. It was 3:45 a.m. I figured I'd step outside for a bit, cool off, breathe some fresh air. Maybe that would help. I pulled on a t-shirt and a pair of shorts, then slowly unzipped the tent flap. The cool night breeze hit my face almost instantly, and I sighed in relief. My tent was pitched with the entrance facing the river. As I leaned out, letting the cold air wash over me, something immediately caught my attention. There was someone standing in the river, directly in the middle of it. They were facing downstream, motionless, as if frozen in place. The water was high, probably waist deep, and freezing cold, somewhere around 30 or 40 degrees Fahrenheit. I knew that for sure because we'd been briefed on the temperature and safety risks the night before. But this person, they weren't even wearing a shirt, just standing there, chest bare, unmoving, like they didn't feel the cold at all. And that confused the hell out of me. I stood there, frozen, staring at the figure in the river, my breath caught in my throat, not just from the cold, but from the way this person was standing, still, unshaken, like the current didn't even touch them. But then, something clicked. I knew him. Even in the faint moonlight, I could make out his face. The person standing waist deep in that freezing river was my friend, someone from my own troop. For privacy's sake, I'll just call him Dalton. I blinked, stunned. My mind scrambled for some kind of explanation, but none of it made sense. He didn't move, didn't respond, just stood there with his back slightly hunched, arms slack at his sides, like he wasn't even present. So I called out to him, once, twice. Only then did he react. Slowly, like someone waking from a deep dream, Dalton turned his head and looked right at me. For a second, he just stared. then glanced around in all directions like he was trying to figure out where he was. And then he yelled, "What the?" He spun around and splashed frantically through the freezing water, stumbling back to shore as fast as his legs would carry him. I rushed to grab a towel and one of my spare shirts from the tent. As he stepped onto the bank, shivering and soaked to the bone, I wrapped him in the towel and looked him dead in the eyes. "What the hell were you doing out there?" I asked, my voice low but shaking. "It's 4 a.m. That water could have killed you." Dalton looked completely out of it, like he was only just now waking up. His teeth chattered and his skin was pale, goosebumps covering his arms. "I don't know," he said. "I swear, I woke up when you yelled. Next thing I know, I'm in the middle of the river." He looked scared. Not the kind of scared you get when you're caught doing something dumb. This was real. Confused, disoriented, honest fear. Neither of us had any clue how he got there. Sleepwalking? Maybe. But he'd never done that before. Not once. He even told me later that day he'd never had a single sleepwalking episode in his life. No history of it, nothing. Whatever happened that night, it didn't add up. And what chilled me most wasn't just how he ended up in that river. It was the thought of what might have happened if I hadn't woken up. If I hadn't stepped out of my tent when I did, Dalton could have been dead by morning. This is going to be a short but deeply unsettling true story from my own life. Something that happened when I was just 13 years old. And I swear to you, every word of it is real. Back then, I was one of the quieter kids in my Boy Scout troop. I wasn't exactly shy. I could talk to people when I needed to, but I never really connected with most of the other guys in the group. They had their own cliques, their own inside jokes. I mostly kept to myself. This happened during our final campout of the 2008 season. It was October, and there was that sharp edge to the air, the kind of chill that makes you pull your sleeves down, but also makes long hikes feel a little more bearable. Looking back, I didn't know it at the time, but that trip would end up being the last campout of my life. And you'll understand why soon. We were on one of our usual hikes, weaving through a stretch of forest that felt like it hadn't seen people in weeks. I was trailing behind, like I often did, letting the others walk ahead while I took my time. At some point, I felt the sudden urge to pee. Not wanting to shout out or make a scene, I just let the group drift farther ahead until they were nearly out of sight. Then I stepped off the trail and slipped behind a tree, figuring I'd catch up in a minute or two. That's when it happened. I was just about to unzip when I heard it. A heavy, solid thud hitting the forest floor not far from where I stood. I froze. It wasn't the sound of a branch falling. It wasn't something natural. This sound had weight to it, like something large had just stepped down into the dry leaves. The kind of sound that instantly makes your skin crawl, even before your brain can catch up. My heart felt like it jumped into my throat. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I stood there, every part of me buzzing with panic, trying to listen, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. But there was nothing else, just silence, and that creeping sensation that I wasn't alone. I didn't wait around to find out what it was. I bolted. I sprinted through the trees, lungs burning, and didn't stop until I caught up with the group. They were still walking, still talking like nothing had happened. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. I didn't even know what to say. All I knew was that I had just heard something in those woods, something heavy, something alive, and it wasn't one of us. but I kept it to myself. At the time, I thought maybe it was better not to know. Let me jump ahead to that night. I was trying to fall asleep in my tent. Each of us in our small troop had our own, so I had a bit of personal space, though out there in the dark woods, it didn't feel like much. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. I zipped myself in, curled up in my sleeping bag, and did my best to drift off quickly. But just as I was finally starting to settle, a strange sound broke the silence. It was faint, almost like someone breathing, but not natural breathing. It sounded distorted, mechanical, like it was coming through a phone speaker. Raspy, low, with a bit of static cutting in and out. It was coming from inside my bag. Confused, I sat up and started digging through it, half asleep and hoping I wasn't just imagining things. That's when I pulled it out, a big, heavy walkie-talkie. I stared at it, stunned. It definitely wasn't mine. I hadn't packed a walkie-talkie and no one had given me one. But somehow, here it was, in my bag, humming with static. And then, from the speaker, a voice. Low, muffled, deep enough to make my skin crawl. "I'm watching you, kid." My heart dropped. I gripped the walkie with both hands and instinctively pressed the talk button. "Who is this?" I asked, trying to sound firm, but my voice cracked. I hoped it was one of the guys in our troop trying to mess with me. A prank, just a dumb joke. But there was no response. Only silence. Then another sharp burst of static. "Is this Mick?" I asked again, this time more hesitantly. Then the voice came back, slower, clearer, heavier. "I'm right outside your tent." Before I could even react, the fabric of my tent pushed inward, like someone was pressing a hand or a whole body against it, right where I was sitting. I screamed, loud, uncontrolled, like a terrified kid who didn't care how he sounded anymore. Whoever was outside took off. I heard them, fast footsteps thudding through the dirt and leaves, crashing into the woods. Seconds later, 2 of our scoutmasters burst into my tent, flashlights beaming, faces tight with concern. I couldn't even breathe at first. My chest was tight, my vision spinning, and all I could do was shakily point to the walkie-talkie and try to explain through panicked breaths what had just happened. I told them everything. They looked at the device, exchanged a few words, then left the tent. A few minutes later, I heard them lecturing the rest of the troop, clearly thinking this was just a cruel prank one of the boys had played on me. But once I had calmed down a bit, I stepped out and told them something I needed them to understand. The voice I heard, that wasn't one of the kids. It was too deep, too slow, too wrong. It didn't sound like anyone in our troop. After that, they made all of us double up in the tents, 3 to a tent for the rest of the night. No exceptions.